Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. And because this is our Friday weekly live stream, also here with Kevin Noon. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I was worried you were going to keep me waiting so long. It was going to turn into the pregame show. Luckily, you managed to remember what you needed to say, so that was good. I'm fantastic. Even better because Kevin's here, which means it must be Friday, which means it must almost be football game day, which means yes, there's a lot to be happy about there.
Football game day, meaning actually game night with the 7 p.m. kickoff with Toledo. But first, Kevin, did you hear Tom's doing pretty well?
I did. I mean, and that's good because it's Tom's world and we're just here along for the ride. So, I'm happy that the game is coming up. I'm not happy that it'll probably be a 3 a.m. to bed type of situation, only to bounce up and have to do a bunch of work on Sunday. But, first world problems.
As everybody knows, this is a Friday show, and we have nothing prepared. I do have something prepared. We'll get to that here in a second. Tom and Kevin obviously never have anything prepared, so this is all about you guys. Viewers, drive the show. Ask questions, please, so that we can have something to talk about. And I see our guy Ryan Dawes has already come through.
Yes, super chat from Ryan Dawes. Good afternoon, Kevin, Tom, and Todd. Will OSU finally achieve Tom's fabled 220 and 220 tomorrow night, or perhaps 250 and 250? I think this is the week it happens. And Tony, why is this the week that it's finally going to happen?
Well, it has happened once before, but it'll happen this week. It's still your bold prediction, though, right? You took it, didn't you? Is it mine?
It is yours. Yes, you have it at 226 and 226 or something like that. So
yes, 226. Yes.
This was my white whale all year last year, and it never actually happened for me. There was one week when I just said, you know what? Fine, forget it. Screw you guys. I'm going home. And then so Tony took it, and that was the Akron game last week, which is the only week that it happened. So this week, Tony put his marker down on that. Got it for 226. So yes, you can look forward to that happening tomorrow.
Kevin, what do you think? It seems like it's so simple to have happen. 220 yards passing and throw and rushing. Obviously, we had to take it up a notch because we both wanted 220, and then we just have to bid it up until somebody's like, "I'm out." But if it's going to happen, is it? Answer Ryan's question, please. Is this the week that we get to 226 for good old Tony G?
I just wanted to sit there and see you guys bid it up. I can name that tune in just one note, type of situation there. I think that Toledo's going to try as much as it can to slow down Ohio State's run game, and I think that the passing numbers will certainly be there. It comes down to what how much Ohio State wants to run, and if Ohio State gets close to covering in there, which is 32 as of this morning was the line I saw. I think Ohio State, means that Ohio State's going to get a big, and then they're going to end up bringing in Dallin Hayden and maybe Chip Trainum, and I think that they could get to that number. So I think 220 and 220 is very doable. 250, maybe a little bit more of a stretch, but I wouldn't give you 2 points for this bold prediction or anything like that. This is a 1 point.
It is funny though that this probably should be a 2-pointer because it it only happens once a year basically with these passing quarterbacks. I could go back and look, and like with Justin Fields or with JT Barrett, it would happen pretty routinely, and that's why it's so frustrating for Tom. Not for me. It happens when I predict it to happen. But I can understand the frustration that Tom would feel not getting a bold prediction correct. Believe me, I can understand those frustrations. But, Tom, I hope for your sake that it happens this week, or actually my sake. I hope for collectively our sakes it happens this week. And I'm rooting for you, Tom, that you finally get to see this happen again for somebody else.
The best possible way for it to happen, the way that makes me the most angry for just a completely artificial number. It is wild that used to be Jim Tressel's just 250, right? Was that him? And Urban Meyer used 250, and it's like, and they haven't gotten, it's like a completely rare event when they even get to 220. That was one at the beginning of last season I put in there. I was like, oh, this is going to happen constantly. This is going to be easy money for me. And then nope. And it fails in so many different ways and unique ways each week. That's what really makes it fun, is which way am I going to get annoyed at them not doing this week? And that's really the real fun part of this.
Even the 2011 team did it to open a season. 224 yards rushing, 293 yards passing with Joe Boserman and Braxton Miller. 2012 team did it like 3 times. Like I wonder let's look at the 2019 that ran the ball all over the place. Yeah, they did it the first 2 games, then like 2 more in a row, and it's just it needs to be happening more. And it looks like maybe 5 or 6 times that year. So I mentioned that I did have something prepared. Kevin, would you like to go first or second? As we play America's favorite game show, guess the former Buckeye based on guess the years of the former Buckeye based within like 3 years plus minus. Kevin, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go second.
All right, Tom. I'm so excited. Your former Buckeye, and this is a wide range of years, or maybe it's not. Constantine J. Farcason. Constantine J. Farcason.
What is my range? How closely do I have to get this? Within 5 years?
3 years either way.
3 years either way. Constantine J. Farcason.
And remember, I don't think you've ever gotten one of these correct. Maybe once, but I don't know.
Maybe once, yes. This game is my 220 of the podcast, which is funny because the 220 is also on the podcast. So maybe that's the Furl Mengus of this podcast, is the 220. Constantine Farcason, that has some tremendous that has some tremendous like ancient Greek vibes. So I'm gonna guess like 500 BC. Wait, am I close? No. How about 1923?
Tom, Constantine J. Farcason played from 1918 to 1922. Good job. Congratulations.
Yes! Boom.
Of course,
I would like to announce my retirement from this terrible, stupid game.
I mean, you played 5 years.
No
5 years. You should.
Please.
Yeah, no interviews.
Please respect my decision.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, your name, and unfortunately, he only played 1 year. So good luck with this one. That's why you should have gone first. Your name, Henry W. Feldwish. Henry W. Feldwish.
Joey Jojo Shabadoo. I will say, oh boy.
If he gets it wrong, can I steal?
Yes.
1936.
The 1912 vibes here are off the charts. 1912.
1911, Tom. Look at you.
Oh, so close. Actually, well, I got it. I got him within 3 again. Wow, 2 in a row.
Good job. I hope this bodes well for your bold predictions this week.
Tremendous.
Now, that is all the preparation I have done for this show. So I am tapped. I am completely out.
So you guys further questions. We'll see you next week.
I like Brian Dawes' suggestion that the cot of shame should be downgraded to the inflatable mattress of shame.
I mean,
there are hotels that don't have cots. A lot of
yes,
times
there
it's
are.
the fold-out couch of shame, but what do you think? Inflatable mattress?
Sometimes it's the closet blanket of shame, assuming there is one. You just lay on that on the hardwood floors. But I mean, I'm all for an inflatable mattress because you just never know. I think it's okay to be prepared to have both. Oh, Tom, Sue says you should play the lottery today because you can miss something by one number.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll miss the Powerball number by 1 to 3 in some direction, which I'm sure that's basically a win, right? That counts the same. That counts as a win for that too.
Yeah, just take it in and show them and be like, look how close this was. That's got to be worth something, right?
Tony says it means I'm a winner. Is that not right?
Constantine J. Farcason said I'm a winner.
Good job remembering that name. I had already forgotten it. All right, so let's talk some football. I see there's one Yeah, from Gary K here. Day will never run the ball more. He just loves to pass no matter the situation. It's in his DNA. I will just say, Gary, he is a quarterback. So, yes, literally, it is basically in his DNA that he wants to throw the ball. However, I go back to 2019 and 2020 when the Buckeyes led the Big Ten in rushing. And let me just bring those numbers up for everybody so that they can believe me when I say these things. 2020 with Justin Fields, they averaged 256.9 yards rushing per game. Number 2 was Nebraska at 201 yards rushing per game. Averaged 6 yards a carry, over a yard better than anybody else. Of course, that was the COVID year and whatever. But 2019, J.K. Dobbins, a 2,000-yard rusher. They led the Big Ten that year with 266.8 yards rushing per game, which was 33 more yards rushing per game than Wisconsin. Again, 5.6 yards per carry, 39 touchdowns, led the Big Ten. So the thing is, it's just, for me, Tom, it's passing quarterback versus running quarterback is what the difference is. And when they have Dwayne Haskins, they're throwing the ball. Justin Fields, they could still throw it, but the running aspect was just so dynamic with even Fields wasn't necessarily a runner all the time, but I don't know, the threat and also converting some of those. I just think it's, if you've got the right quarterback, Day has no problem running it. Right now, they just have a guy that throws the ball better than maybe anybody they've ever had.
Right. If it feels like they would like to run it, the threat of the quarterback run, this is the Urban Meyer thing from going back to his Bowling Green days, is if the quarterback is a runner, you have a numbers advantage in the run game. And if the quarterback is not not a runner, then you don't. And the years when they've been able to run the ball really well have been, the Fields years or the JT Barrett years, the Braxton Miller years. It is not a coincidence that it is the Dwayne Haskins years and the CJ Stroud years where they've probably struggled a little bit. And that's just, you cannot turn Braxton, you can't turn Dwayne Haskins or CJ Stroud into Braxton Miller, nor would you necessarily want to, because if you turn them into Braxton Miller, well, the passing game's not quite as good as it. So it does feel like, we talked in 2020, we talked in 2018 about, the interior of the offensive line wasn't great. And that was probably part of it. And that probably was part of it. The lack of the quarterback, of the quarterback as a threat in the run game is probably another part of it. I don't think they want CJ Stroud out there running again. CJ Stroud ran the ball, downfield once, I think last week, and got drilled out of bounds and probably should have been a 15-yard penalty and wasn't. And that is just not a risk that they necessarily want to take. So they want him to use his legs, buy time, let receivers get open. That's how they want him using his legs. And you've seen him doing that this year, and that feels like that's probably about the best case scenario for what they get out of him in terms of his running.
I was looking through over the last decade in the Big Ten, and I believe my quick math, and as Tom can tell you, my quick math is probably better than my slow math or my long math. Like, the less I think about it, maybe the better I do. But the 2019 266 yards rushing per game is the fourth best in the Big Ten over the last decade, or over the last, since 2011, basically. So more than a decade. And it's the second best total for the Buckeyes next to the 2013 season, where they just ran on everybody with Braxton and Carlos Hyde and just destroyed people. So it does show you that they can run it. And Kevin, they were third in the nation in rushing yards per carry last year. I think they've shown that they can run the ball this year, but it is interesting that they're just not able to get that like 55-45 rush to pass type of thing yet. And again, go back to a lot of it is the RPO stuff. If the defense is going to stop the run, then you have to throw it. But when do we see a 40 carry a game, situation with the Buckeyes? Is this? You have already said you think they're going to throw the ball on Toledo this week, right?
Yeah, I do think they're going to throw the ball on Toledo. I think that just the way that defense, I think that's where Ohio State could have the most success. I do see some makings of like a 3-3-5 type of defense for Toledo with how they have the setup with the two ends and a tackle, and just how certain things are. But I don't know. I think that they're really just going to sell out to try and stop the run. That's what's on tape in a lot of ways. And what are you going to do? Are you going? I mean, you got to pick your poison. Are you going to sit there and try and drop a bunch of guys and be like, well, go ahead, just run on us? I mean, we saw Notre Dame drop or rush 2 and drop 9, and CJ Stroud found an open guy. So and say what you will about Notre Dame and its loss to Marshall and so on and so forth. Notre Dame is a more talented team than Toledo is, and I just think that it's a situation of where, all right, if you put in the air, a lot of things can happen at that point. And, we're just going to sit there and try and not let Mayan Williams and Trevion Henderson, just gash us to death. So, I could also see Ohio State come out and be like, well, we want to see what it's like going against defense that's trying to really shut down the run and to see what we can get there too, because Jim Leonard's defense with Wisconsin's coming to town next week, and they're going to be trying to shut a lot of things down there. And this is, say what you will, it's still a tune-up game in a lot of ways. So you're going to have to try and do a lot of things. But I think that their best path to victory for Ohio State is by throwing the ball.
I like this comment from Sue. I think the question is, why can't our quarterback be perfect? And it really is. There is some of that where CJ Stroud is so good, he is compared to perfection almost, because most of his plays are perfect, essentially. And you're like, well, we know you're capable. Why aren't all of your plays perfect? Why are you throwing a low bouncing pass to somebody? And it's like, well, just you can't be perfect all the time, or else, then people would get really. Oh, Tom was pointing at himself. Are you pointing at me through yourself?
No, that is definitely not what I was doing. No. No.
Okay. Yeah, it's.
We know he's not Mr. Perfect. That's Kurt Hennig.
That's Kurt Hennig. But yeah, I think there is a lot of that where what he can do, and then when he doesn't do it, people can be upset about it. I like this one from Jordan Kapler. Pardon us while we talk about Nebraska football for a moment. Do you guys think Nebraska needs an incredible coach, a gimmick, or both? Tom, you are a triple option guy. You think it's time to bring – it would be a pain for everybody else to have to deal with. So, is that where you're leaning with Nebraska, or how do you view that?
I think Nebraska just needs a coach who recognizes that it's not 1995. It's never going to be 1995 again. And they need to be shooting for a 9-win coach, a 10-win coach, not this is the guy who's going to get us back to the national championship, because – barring some really ground shaking changes in the sport, I don't think, a lot of the stuff that made Nebraska back when they were Nebraska, the Prop 48 stuff that went away when they joined the Big 12, some of the strength and conditioning advantages they had, the walk-on program that they had, access to Texas recruits, all of that stuff, that's all changed over the last, 10 to 15 to 20 to 25 years. And a lot of it's not coming back. What they need is a program builder. They need someone who can just do all the crap behind the scenes, all the organizational stuff. This is not a sexy answer at all. This is not go hire a former national championship winning coach and bring him in. No, they need Lance Leipold from Kansas. They need Matt Campbell from Iowa State, because they need to recognize they are no longer the pinnacle of the sport. Now, you get the sense that they've kind of figured that out for the most part, but you need a person who has won in places where it's hard to win. Because guess what? As they are figuring out now, it is now hard to win in Nebraska. They have not made a bowl game since 2016. So they need a Matt Campbell, Lance Leipold kind of guy. You could do it with a Troy Calhoun from Air Force or a Jeff Monken from Army and do it with the triple option. I don't think they have to, but that's a way to do it. You might say that's an option for them, but I don't think that's a necessity. I think there are places where that might be a necessity I think Illinois would need to run the triple in order to be a consistent 7-8 win team. In the same way that Georgia Tech ran the triple and under Paul Johnson, got to the Orange Bowl, where you are enough of a pain in the butt, and it is so different from what anyone else in the league is running that teams cannot build themselves to stop you. So therefore you become very difficult to stop, and you're a real huge pain in the butt to play. I don't think that Nebraska has to run the triple. There are programs in the Big Ten and other Power 5 conferences who I think should. I don't think Nebraska is one of them. They just need a program builder instead of, like, if they hire the big splashy name, like, do not hire Ed Orgeron. Ed Orgeron is like the exact opposite of what you need. Like, yeah, he won a national championship a couple of years ago. You do not have access to Louisiana talent there. I'm very sorry. You do not have access to all of the Louisiana things there. I am very sorry. You need a coach who, the average college football fan probably has to Google to figure out where is Lance Leipold from again? Where is Chris Kleiman from again? Who? What? That's who they need to hire, not big and splashy.
Kevin, what I'm hearing is Tom saying that Nebraska needs a new car with less miles.
Hold on a second. Okay.
There you go. Now Tony's out of the show. So now watch the super chats pour in. Now that Tony's out of the show.
Yes, bring him back. Yes, that's what they'll be crying for.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, they don't need a car with less miles. He's too busy.
Let's not say anything legally actionable here.
Using the Dos Equis on the grass is where I was going with the commercial. I wasn't going anywhere else. Yeah, I know that the demand is going to be to go out and get that splashy name, but they went out to get the splashy name and Scott Frost in terms of that and the favorite son, and that failed miserably. A lot of the coaches that Tom mentioned were great. I have heard Jamie Chadwell from Coastal Carolina being another name as well. How does the alumni base, how do the donors buy into that? Do they allow themselves to be like, okay, well, maybe we need to do this a different way, or is it just no? If we can't go out and get Urban Meyer or whoever, then that's a fail, and we're the groundhog is seen as shadow, and we're due for 40 more years of middling ineptitude. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I think it's funny that there's so many lists out at this point, and we're 2 weeks into the season, or we're going into week 3. We have football on tonight. But I guess technically week 4 if you count 0 week as a week. But yeah, I don't know.
I think my whole thing with these coaches in the Big Ten West is that you need lifers, and I thought Scott Frost, Todd Gump with the super chat, back to the 2 shots. We have to do what the super chat says, right?
We have to do what the super chat says. So I will, while we are honoring Todd's super chat to get us back to the 2 shot. He didn't say which 2, I guess, which is interesting, but I think it was strongly implied which one he wanted to go away. I will also address Jordan Kapler's super chat, which is 8 to 9 wins for Nebraska. So Bo Pelini, I don't think Bo Pelini didn't really get fired for the on-field results. Bo Pelini got fired for a little bit of the on-field results, but also just some of the off-field. There's leaked audio of him, saying words you're not supposed to say in polite company, and being a little bright, and just he didn't play the game with the boosters and all that kind of stuff. But 8 to 9 wins, I think, is kind of, I think that's realistically what you can expect. And you might get an 11-1 season every once in a while. And, we'll see how much life changes for them if and when the Big Ten does go away from divisions in a year or two, because, the Big Ten West is just kind of like, okay. And you're avoiding Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State a lot more than you would be in a normal, in the new format, probably. So we'll see how that actually really impacts things for them. But, I'm just going to read down the list of wins by season for Nebraska since 2001, which is the year they went to the national championship game, played Miami, and got murdered in the Rose Bowl. 7, 10, 5, 8, 9, 5, 9, 10, 10, 9, 10, 9, 9, 6, 9, 4, 4, 5, 3, 3. And then they're 1 and 2 this season. It just, you didn't hear me say the word 11 at any point after that national championship game appearance, did you? So that feels like right now, realistically, that is what Nebraska football is. If you want to be something other than that, okay. Wow, Sue spending $10. Todd spent $5 to make Tony go away. Sue spending $10 to bring Tony back.
This is like how
do I hear $15?
$15 to get rid of them. You have to sit there in order to get your fight song played. You have to out tip the other guy.
There you
This is
go.
like
There's dueling pianos on the podcast. I did want to touch on Kevin's suggestion about Jamie Chadwell real quick, just because Jamie Chadwell at Coastal. I mean, it is something that I don't think people realize. They functionally run the triple there. It is out of the gun, so it's not like the flexbone based academy triple option necessarily. It's the same concept. It's just kind of the it is the the old triple option, but they've gotten like a glam up. Someone has taken them, someone has taken them to the mall on one of those makeover shows, and they've gotten new clothes and a new haircut, and it's like, hey, looking good, triple option, looking good, Jamie Chadwell. That is a really interesting suggestion, because that's a spot. Coastal's a really interesting program because it was started. Now I'm going to blank on the coach's name because my memory is terrible at this point. But the coach was someone who had made $1 trillion starting Scottrade or something, and one of those big investment firms, and made millions and millions and millions of dollars. And he'd always wanted to be a football coach, so he left, retired from the financial world, and then started the Coastal Carolina program and kind of got that off the ground. And it was okay, but it never really went anywhere. And then Jamie Chadwell came in and has turned them into really kind of a power. So he's someone who seems like he might be someone who kind of fits that mold. I don't know if he's at the top of the list, but he's someone who would be a pretty intriguing hire there as well.
Is he a little too Scott Frosty though, in terms of known for his offense, and you just did that from the Southeast, and you went and got Scott Frost, but he has helped build that program, as you said. Again, they've got to recalibrate their expectations and worry about getting things built up the right way. I think that's enough Nebraska talk for the people, unless of course people continue to talk about it. I want to address this one from Steve Buckholtz. How early does Caden Curry see action tomorrow night? He and Mike Hall are beasts. And Kevin, Tom, and I have talked about this on Buckeye Weekly, and also I think probably Buckeyes tomorrow morning. So we'll let you chime in here. I am expecting Caden Curry to play earlier. I would like to see him in the first half of this one.
Yeah, I think that it would be interesting to see him in the first half, give him some run out there. While maybe the game is still somewhat up in the air at that point, see how he's able to go at that point. Because when he was out there against Arkansas State, the fat lady had sung. We knew what was going on at that point. It doesn't take away the fact that he went out there, recorded a TFL almost immediately and everything else. But, let's see where this depth is going to come from, because ultimately you're going to have to get to the point of where you're playing your best guys. And if Caden Curry suddenly emerges as somebody that has to be out there, you're going to need to know it sooner rather than later. It's not a case of just holding on to him at this point. And truthfully speaking, it's a matter of you need to figure out what the reps have got to be. How are you going to start splitting these things up as you get into league play? And while Wisconsin, we sit there and we talk about how they always have a great offensive line, probably not one of their better offensive lines here in recent memory, but maybe one where a smaller player like Curry could get swallowed up a little bit. But you still have got a lot of league games where you're going to need to get some good run out of guys like Caden Curry.
Yeah, Tom, I think you look at the way that the sophomores have passed by Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste. They need to know if Caden Curry can do enough in early action against starters to know, like, is it time to move him past those guys? Because we've already, they've been here for a long time. Obviously, Tyler Friday didn't play last year. He was hurt. But everybody on this defensive line has been given an opportunity to clean up in quote unquote garbage time. And some guys you've seen do it, other guys you haven't. And so it's like, Caden Curry did this, but he did it against nobodies, or he did it in the fourth quarter of a blowout. Tyler Friday, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, everybody else has had that same opportunity during their careers. And, maybe they did it, maybe they didn't do it. Curry has done it. And so now it's like, okay, that you check off that one. Now let's see it in the third quarter. Let's see it in the second quarter, something like that, so that they know maybe at some point you're going to need him to be in front of those guys if they aren't playing as well as you need them to play. Because right now they're very reliant on Zach Harrison, Jack Sawyer, and JT Tuimoloau. I don't know how long you can last with just 3 guys if you're not getting production out of anybody else behind them.
Yeah, Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste have kind of just been they've kind of just been guys. They haven't been bad. I don't know that they've been a detriment to the defense. They just haven't ever really produced in the way that you kind of were hoping they would start producing at some point based on, what their rankings were coming in. It just hasn't happened. I think part of that's been injury, and just part of that just has been they just haven't produced. So yeah, you do need to see Caden Curry earlier on Saturday, and I think you're going to. I think 7 minutes left in the second quarter is about when I would start being surprised that you haven't seen him. I think there's a possibility you see him in the first quarter, but I think midway through the second quarter is when I'd sort of expect to see him in there for a drive or so, and just they have to figure out what they've got. And I don't think he's going to be someone who's going to be a 40 snap a game guy for them by the end of the year necessarily. But he's someone who, to Kevin's point about his size, he's not necessarily going to, you got to see how he's going to hold up against the run, against bigger offensive lines and bigger running backs. But, even if he isn't your, 40 snap a game guy against Wisconsin or Iowa or a team like that, he probably has a role in some situations. And, is that in some kind of a rushman package, or is that just, you're going to keep things somewhat simple because he's a true freshman and you're going to put him in positions where he can succeed. But it feels like there are some positions in which he probably can succeed. So you got to kind of sort of start figuring that out now. It feels like he kind of took step number 1 on that process last weekend. And now this weekend, you see him a little earlier. I would expect to see him in the first half and then see if he can take step number 2.
And we'll see how maybe Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Tyler Friday react to that and how they respond. And you would hope that they would they would make some plays as well, and everybody raises up from the competition. But there has to be competition, and that comes from putting younger guys in the game. You just had something up there from Gary K there, Kevin.
Yeah, I'll get back to it here.
But I'm also seeing the mention of Michigan football being cicadas who show up every 10 to 17 years. And that is somewhat clever, climbing out of the ground after being, sort of in hibernation or whatever they do every decade or so. And that's, we'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but that might be just about right in terms of how often they are relevant, super relevant. They made the playoffs last year, certainly top 5 this year, and they probably, Tom, 10-1 or 11-0 when they get to Columbus this year for Michigan. Or do you think it's going to be less than that?
Yeah, I would be very surprised if it wasn't 10-1 or 11-0. You look at the schedule and it's just, so a lot of the games that you thought were maybe going to be challenging. There were a bunch of games that weren't going to be challenging, and I still feel like we don't really know a whole heck of a lot about anything because they've played such bad competition, and they're going to play such bad competition this week too. But there's just, Penn State is, I think, going to be okay, but they get Penn State at home this year. Michigan State, I think we'll probably know a little more about Michigan State after this weekend when they go to Washington. But there's just, who do they have cross division? They have Nebraska cross division, right? And
Iowa, they're at Iowa in week 4.
Wow, I take it back. I said they weren't going to play any good competition, and they play Iowa. So I take it all back.
Iowa is always good for one crazy shouldn't happen type of game at Kinnick, though. It's one of those things. That's the thing that always concerns you is if you get Iowa at Iowa, you just it can be a slog.
Yes, I watched in person Brian Ferentz offense score 55 points one time. It is that was one of those real make-a-wish moments. Like, wow, it's like what's someone in the comments is talking about Haley's comment in a different context. That was a real Haley's comment moment. Like, wow, where were you when? And
that was more of a Haley's meteor.
It was the meteor that ended the Greg. Well, didn't end the Greg Schiano era. Maybe should have, but didn't. That lasted another year. But yeah, it was. I can't imagine that they're not 10-1 or 11-0 coming into the Ohio State game. But I think you're still legitimately. I think you're going to have some questions about both Ohio State and Michigan going into that game, because it's like, boy, we thought we knew what Ohio State had after week 1 against Notre Dame, and it's like, oh boy, that doesn't, they've played 2 teams that would just mollywomp any of Michigan's 3 non-conference opponents, but boy, I don't think we know nearly as much about Ohio State as we thought we might, 8-9 days ago.
And Kevin, to your point, playing at Iowa is very tough, especially if you're Iowa.
Yeah, at least that's better than your Les Miles joke. I mean, because there's a level of truth to what you just said there. I mean, Iowa's greatest challenge is Iowa. I mean, it is nepotism. So it's bad.
I like how, not to interrupt you, but like Ohio State Ryan Day is like, we focus on us, we're worried about us, and Iowa's like, we're worried about us. It's bad here, and we, that's the bigger concern than anybody they're playing.
We need to start a Buckeye Weekly YouTube comments out of context account, because I'm just scrolling through here from King Bronco. World wars don't count then, I guess. Like, there's a whole conversation that makes that make a little more sense, but I think that's just out of context. I think that's one of my favorite comments so far.
Yeah, King Bronco found us this week and now is becoming a regular fixture in the chats. And as long as King Bronco plays nicely, but we generally start with 42-27, and then he talks about football before electricity and wash, rinse, repeat, and then he gets shouted down by Sue, by Devin, by Steve Buckholtz, by Gary, pretty much by everybody. So we do have a smattering of Michigan people who follow the channel, and we thank everybody who follows the channel. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit that bell, all of that good stuff. Nice, seamless promotion right there into all of that. And be sure to check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. The best team recruiting coverage, the most handsome podcast hosts, X's and O's, everything you could want at Buckeye Huddle. So give us a look over there.
I will counter the one thing you said. King Bronco is not a regular, participant or there's nothing regular about him. Let's just be clear on that one.
He's diet regular.
This one from Ryan Dawes. If Jackson Smith-Njigba plays, does he go for 100 yards in the first quarter? I will say no, but it is a question of, will he go for 100 yards this weekend? And the depth that we've talked about in this receiver room now seems to be coming to fruition if Jackson is back, if Julian Fleming is back, to where the idea of 100 yards for any one guy is lessened. Still they had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jackson last year, but it was just those 3. Now you've got, 4 guys that it could be at any point, and I'm throwing Julian Fleming in there. Maybe others won't, but I don't see 100 yards yet this weekend for Jackson, Tom. I don't know how much he's going to play. I think maybe next week is where Wisconsin is going to have some issues on how they're going to deal with him with their 3-4 defense and how they want to employ their pass rush and their pass defense against Ohio State and a dynamic slot receiver. But this week, I will say 5 for 80.
5 for 80 for Jackson Smith-Njigba. I feel like I want to take over and over, but I might take under and under because they might try to kind of generally bring him in slowly and not, just kind of work him back in. And, part of the question also is, so Julian Fleming, is Julian Fleming going to play? Is Cam Babb going to play? You get the sense that they think that one or both of those guys is going to play. So, that if it's Julian Fleming, they're going to want to work him in as well. 5 for 80. I'm going to say over on the 5 and very, very, very slightly over on the 80. Very slightly over. And I'm talking 7 for 85 or something, something like that maybe is a decent ballpark.
Kevin?
I see it as a case of if he comes out and plays in this game, they're going to want to make sure that he and CJ kind of pick up where they left off in terms of chemistry and whatnot. But I think everybody in the world is going to know that Stroud and JSN are going to want to try and make a connection there and have, and they're going to target. But everybody knew that last year and couldn't stop him as he led the team in receptions and yardage and so on and so forth. I mean, Utah's still trying to figure out how to cover him. And granted, at some point they did have a receiver out there playing defensive back due to their own injury woes. But if we're saying, 5 and 80 is kind of the over under.
Mm-hmm.
I think 5 sounds about right, but I'm going to say over on the yardage because I think it's going to be a case of where you throw a 7-yard pass and he sits there and splits 2 defenders and is off to the races. So I could see I could see 5 and 100 and a tutty in there, but I don't know. It'll be interesting. It'll be a good problem to have. I mean, and because that there's not a chance that he's playing unless he's like 95% or better, because there's just no reason to risk it.
Yeah, and when he's playing in the slot, you always have to worry about the touchdown kind of play that Emeka Egbuka had last week, where they do the drag and then they shoot up. It's a fake drag to basically a 9 route down the middle of the field that has been effective for them in the past, and that's an easy way to pick up 50 yards right off the bat. Market X there. If Jackson plays, I think he gets like 40 to 50 yards and pulled out before halftime. See no problem with that, and wouldn't be surprised with that at all. And Justin Monroe comment here. Historically, how much does having a player like Jackson Smith-Njigba in the game improve the rest of the offense? And it's sizable. It's Ryan Day talked about how they have so much planned for Jackson and off of Jackson. And so when he's not in, somebody else has to take that spot, and then they have to try to figure out those plans with him. And do they continue to call those plays, or now do they go somewhere else? And so they have to figure out exactly what they're going to do without him. And then I mentioned this a couple of days ago in one of the shows. I asked Emeka Egbuka the difficulties of switching positions. He's like, well, I know the plays, so I'm comfortable with the plays. It's just when you go from one spot to the other, and specifically when you go inside to outside, you don't know how those corners are playing, and you don't necessarily know how the safeties are playing. So that's a learning process for however many snaps that takes. And so those are plays that may be directed that way, but can't be completed just because the feeling out process. So there's just a lot of that at every position when Jackson is gone and everybody moves. It's like when a left guard is out of the game and you move the right guard over and you move the right tackle to right guard, and however all of the moving pieces, there's some adjustment at each of those. So the fewer moving pieces you can have, the better. But they don't just plug in Xavier Johnson for Jackson and then everybody else is the same. They want everybody to do everything, and that takes, they know the plays, but it takes time for them to figure out exactly how they're being played defensively. So that's, I think, one of the areas where there is some effect.
Yeah, Kevin had it exactly right in the comments there, the butterfly effect. It's just, Jackson Smith-Njigba goes down with a little bit of a hamstring thing, and all of a sudden you get 3 guys playing in different spots. And, what does it mean for, the impact of all those different spots? And then that probably has an impact on the run game and all that. So, yeah, it does. Sue's talking about the, wanting the offense to have a good game just so you don't have to hear the people talking about the fact that this has been a disappointing offense this year. And I mean, I can see that. I get that. So, yeah, it is. This feels like this has the opportunity to be something of a get right week for the team. And again, they were fine last week. They were not incredible last week, but they were fine. It was not. I didn't see anything that was a big concern. And to me, the fact that the defenses look so good for the most part is, that is more significant to me than the offense being like, just okay. Because the talent is there, the whole system, the whole scheme is there for the offense to be really good. So it feels like that's going to kind of come along. And, the real question was, how will the defense be? Well, you're starting to get the answer on the defense, it feels like, and the answer has been pretty good.
Yeah, one of the comments here from Gary K. I want to see the offense like we saw in the fourth quarter of the last game. I assume we're talking about Notre Dame there, where they were able to run the ball very well against a defense that knew it was coming and they couldn't do anything about it. And really, I think this offense can do that. We'll be able to do it this week. I don't know how much more it will prove doing it this week. I'm kind of with Kevin. I think you get the passing game going this week and you get all of the rust off, and that way you can do whatever you want against Wisconsin, because you will need to be able to do everything against Wisconsin. So can't believe I'm saying this. I agree with Kevin about something. And the fact that I'm doing it in front of everybody just tells you how rare it is.
Super chat asking Kevin to drop Kevin out of the show. Hang on.
But Kevin, good job coming up with a good point. Perfect. And see you, Kev. Now it's just me and Tom. Tom, say something.
Something.
Perfect. I forgot what we were talking about because I'm just glad Kevin is gone. So if you want to, we're talking about the offense and the running game and whatever. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, this is how much of a challenge do you view the Wisconsin game next week as being? Not to get ahead of ourselves on this, and you know, Tony, podcasters have to take games 1 week at a time. You don't ever want to look ahead, but the Wisconsin game, it feels like maybe people are overlooking that one already in some ways because, well, they lost to Washington State. And so if they lost to Washington State, they must be terrible. So Ohio State's going to crush them. And I think there's, I have real serious concerns about the Wisconsin offense and their ability to keep up with the Ohio State offense. But that's a pretty good defense by and large. And if they can, there was a great stat in the media notes this week from Jerry Emig and Mike Bassford that, Ryan Day has now coached 40 games. He's 36-4. He is 32-0 when they score 30 points. And he's 4-4 when they don't score 30 points. So, I mean, the roadmap to beat Ohio State is very, very clear at this point. And it is, do not get in a shootout with them because they will outshoot you. But if you can hold them down and keep the score relatively low, which is what Wisconsin probably is going to try to do, that is when, if you can hold them under 30, that's when they're vulnerable. And so that seems like, I'm certainly not picking Wisconsin to win that game. There's a way that turns out like the 2019 regular season Ohio State-Wisconsin game where the defense just dominates and the, Wisconsin can't get anything going and it, turns into a blowout. But I think that's one that I think people are already writing off as like, a fait accompli that they'll crush Wisconsin. And I don't know that that's necessarily true.
I'm just looking at the last 3 seasons from like 2019 to present day. Wisconsin has allowed 30 or more points 4 times. 2 of those times were in 2020 to Ohio State. And then last year you had the bizarre Notre Dame game. And then the kind of the bizarre Michigan game where they just run over and run through. And I have a lot of respect for Wisconsin's defense and defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard. They do what they do well. They've been doing it for a while. So this is not a new defense for any of them. So everybody knows the defense. Everybody has confidence in it. They can adjust on the fly. And so it's just very sound. And there's guys there that make plays in the backfield. And that's another thing where they get you behind schedule, get you behind the chains. And now you've got a 2nd and 16 or a 2nd and 12. And now you're throwing the ball and that's plays right into what they want to do with their pass rush. So I think it's a very serious game, but, I was also concerned about the Wisconsin running game. You expect them to be so good. And Kevin, last week against Washington State, I think they rushed for like 180 yards and under 4 yards a carry. That's 180 yards is actually like more than what Ohio State is rushing for right now, but 4 yards a carry for Wisconsin. If Washington State can do that, you would think Ohio State can do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, because Graham Mertz in the passing game is not, it's a far cry from game 1 where we saw him come out against Illinois and light them up. And then it's all been much worse since that point. So they are a running team. Braylon Allen, Ches Malusi, those are their 2 guys. I mean, Braylon Allen was over 1,000 yards. Malusi was 800 yards. And if you're getting held to 4 per carry, that's a big problem. That's just, you're starting to enter Iowa territory in terms of offensive inefficiency when you get to that realm. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that the Wisconsin defense is going to be good enough to hold Ohio State to a point of where Wisconsin is going to be able to outscore them, because as I'm looking at past games against Ohio State for Wisconsin. When they played in 19, Ohio State won 34-21. When they played the other time in 19, it was 38-7. It was 27-21 in 2017, 30-23. So at that point, Ohio State was averaging over 30 points. Excuse me. Wisconsin was in the high teens. I don't think this Wisconsin team is necessarily going to get into the high teens this year against Ohio State.
It's crazy that they lost that Washington State game. Both teams turned it over 3 times. Washington State posted 253 yards of total offense, and yet Wisconsin still found a way to lose. And that's discouraging. It's certainly a bizarre loss, and one that you would expect them to bounce back quickly from, because it was so out of character. Like, I don't think that's like one of those random Big Ten West losses, basically, where it's like, oh, I can't believe you lost to Miami of Ohio.
Well, that's sort of a function of how some of those teams play. You get Northwestern loses those games. Wisconsin loses those games. Iowa loses those games because you're playing lower scoring games. And when you're playing lower scoring games, those are more high variance because it just takes one play here or there. Like, I go back to like the 2003 Ohio State Wisconsin game. Ohio State lost that game. Ohio State was a better team that year, but Ohio State lost that game because it was 10-10 in the fourth quarter, and it took Chris Gamble biting on one out and up from Lee Evans, and ta-da, they've lost by 7 points. Wisconsin had, kind of controlled that game against Washington State, but they were only up 14-0. Well, then it only takes a couple plays for Washington State to get back in it and take the lead and win the game. Iowa runs into that because it's so low scoring. They had, they scored 7 points against Iowa State. Well, it doesn't take very much. Your defense can be really good. If you score 7 points, you're gonna go 500 if you're Iowa this year so far, which is wild. That still makes me so irrationally angry. I can't even explain why that makes me so angry. It just makes me so angry that Brian Ferentz has that job. But when you're playing those lower scoring games, that's where you see those upsets happen. Those kind of irrational, like inexplicable upsets. The example I've used on this show before is Tony Bennett's Virginia team, number 1 seed. They try and win every game 52-45. And then if you have one team that just hits some threes, all of a sudden it's like, well, boy, they can get up there, and you don't have to score. Here's the thing about only trying to win every game 52-45. The other team doesn't have to have an incredible game. They just have to get into the 60s and you're going to lose. So that's it happens in basketball. It happens in football. Those are just very high. They can be very high variance games, just because the margin for error is just you're trying to play and just win in this one very narrow specific way. And if something doesn't go right, one play, boom, you can lose.
This comment from Justin Monroe. Would you say that the coaches' game plans are their own kind of matchup on the sideline, similar to matchups on the field? How would you like to see Day's offense adapt to fit into these matchups? I assume we're talking about coaches versus coaches is how I read this, like Justin or Ryan Day against Wisconsin defensive coordinator, who I just said, and just completely
Jim Leonard.
Yeah. I think Day's offense is such that defensive coordinators have to do as much game planning for him as he has to do for anybody else, because it's not just a passing offense. It's a stressor all over the place. And then he will also game plan other stressors into it in terms of where are the weak spots of this defense? Let's employ some plays for that as well. So yeah, he's going to have to factor in obviously all of the different things that Jim Leonard does, but they also have to factor in all of the things that Ryan Day does. And there are definitely coaches against coaches in situations like these. And it's as fun to watch as the stuff on the field for these matchups. And they, other coaches talk about it, other, onlookers talk about it. And there are certainly like Ryan Day against Brent Venables from 2020. That was a big thing. And all Ryan Day had to do to stop Clemson was hold up placards to keep his signs from being stolen, basically. So good job, Ryan Day. No thoughts from anybody. Okay, Tom, you're texting. Kevin,
I was there. I remember that. Yes. Yeah, it was. But I mean, there was a chess match the year before too, where it was that Brent Venables Ryan Day chess match in 2019 at the Fiesta Bowl was another kind of back and forth, and you saw some guys changing what they're doing, but that's another one where that's one of the games Ryan Day lost. One of those games where they scored less than 30 points, scored 23 that game, and again, when you're playing these lower scoring games, all it takes is a call not going your way on a fumble return, or one long play down the field with Trevor Lawrence running the ball on the game-winning drive, or Chris Olave and Justin Fields having a little miscommunication. Like that's it. It just takes like one of those plays or two of those plays. That game was weird because it took about 5 of those plays for that game to end the way it did. But you get to the point where you can have a play like that at the end of the game, and boom, you're not, that's enough to end your season. And that was another one where you're in that low scoring game, you're kicking a lot of field goals in the first half, you punt the ball away on 4th and 3 with 1.5 minutes left, and you're putting yourself in a position where the game you were taking, you are not taking your destiny into your own hands and just throttling the life out of the opponent. You're kind of keeping them in the game, and that's when bad things can happen.
And Tom, if they had allowed that touchdown return, do you know how many points that would have given Ohio State?
Well, assuming they made the PAT, Tony, I'm going to say roughly 30, because 29 or 23 plus 7.
And as we know, when Ryan Day scores 30, they win. Here's one from Sue El Suzabo. Who's your upset of the week? And looking through the scores on the lines, like Michigan State winning at Washington would be an upset. Arkansas or Auburn. Let's see, I just lost them. Auburn is a 3-point underdog at home, so like Auburn winning at home is technically an upset. I like that one. BYU winning at Oregon is also an upset.
That's mine.
A lot of these close lines, Tom, you can have the BYU one. I will give Kevin Nebraska an 11-point underdog at home to Oklahoma. Congratulations on that one, Kevin. That's a great pick.
Okay.
I am going to take South Carolina. No, I am not. But wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, wouldn't that be a magical world to live in? Probably not going to happen, but you never know. We Tony and I did our. If you enjoyed hearing Tony and I talk about such things, we recorded our Saturday morning show already, talking about a lot of this stuff, and went through. And in our show prep, we're pulling lines from 2 different places, and we're constantly like a field goal off, and it was like how. And then we ended up just kind of throwing up our hands and stopping midway through. But it's a really fun show. You should listen.
Although that Georgia, South Carolina, we were like 10 points off.
Yeah,
because it was. And now I see it's 25. Now I was saying it was 24. You're saying it. You were showing it like 14 or something.
I think I had the opening lines or something from the site I was pulling stuff from. So yes, it was. I would expect South Carolina to cover 25. That's too many points. I don't think they're going to win it, but I think that's too many points. You mentioned the BYU Oregon game. That just feels like I'm going to need to see this Oregon defense get off the field against a good opponent. And I think BYU is a good opponent that can really just kind of mash their faces in the trenches and win the game that way. So I will take BYU and the points there.
I agree with you there. I'm going to start finishing up these last starred comments here as we wrap up the hour. This from DK. Are Fickle and Freeman the only 2 OSU alums that are FBS head coaches? If so, it's kind of crazy how Mount Union has the same number with Matt Campbell and Jason Candle at Iowa State and Toledo. I can't think of any others off the top of my head. We know Rob Harley, of course, defensive coordinator at Arkansas State, former Buckeye walk-on safety. But this is not. I mean, there have been plenty of other coaches who have coached at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of alums, like I don't,
Pelini's
Eddie
not coaching
George is
anymore.
not FBS. Eddie George is
Right.
FCS. What? Who? Tom?
Bo Pelini's not coaching anymore.
No.
Or not head coaching anymore.
No. So I think there's plenty of assistants like Pepe Pearson, and Richard McNutt is also at Tennessee State, former Ohio State Heisman candidate cornerback. But I think those are I think that's the gist of it. And if anybody else knows and wants to correct
And then,
us,
as just me, Tim pointing out in the NFL ranks, you've got Vrabel.
Yeah.
And for anybody who asks, is he ever a candidate to be back at Ohio State? I don't ever see him coming back to college. That's not his thing. I think he enjoys being with pros, and he's in his element right there. I just imagining him try to walk into 16-year-old's house right now and recruit them. It just would not go well. I'm imagining broken furniture, a fist through the wall, something of that nature, routinely. But this last one from Jordan Kapler, if you aren't even slightly impressed that CJ Stroud can find open receivers when they drop 9 and the water is incredibly muddy, then I don't know what to tell you exactly. The calm, the precision, the timing for all of that when Notre Dame did that drop 9 and he just drops it in right over a defender to Marvin Harrison for a first down. And even I love what he talks about his thought process through plays and talks it through. And it's like, well, I saw this and then I was thinking this, but then, the safety was over there. So I wanted to look him off. And then I came back over here, and he's explaining this like he's got 5 minutes of time to evaluate everything. And he's got like 1.2 seconds to get the ball out of his hands. And even then deciding, well, now I need to throw this one a little bit harder because the safety's coming. Like all of the processing is, like Watson, the supercomputer would be impressed by the processing power and speed that CJ Stroud has.
Well, and not only the processing, but also the memory, where when we're talking to CJ Stroud about that's on like Tuesday after the Saturday. And it's like, hey, there was this one specific play. Do you remember this? And he's contrasting it with another play. He's like, well, in this one, they had the safety here. And then, and it's like, I don't remember where I parked my car outside. How would you remember this stuff? And the answer is that CJ Stroud's not in his mid-40s. Back to you.
Also, he takes a bus to the game.
Smart.
All right. That will the last one there from Sue. My hope is that Georgia loses to South Carolina tomorrow. Is that too much to ask for? Yes,
Probably.
but South Carolina almost did. They actually did it a couple of years ago. I think maybe the last time Georgia was at South Carolina, they did it then, and they shouldn't have. So there's always hope. The SEC, as we know, it just means more, and it's the best conference in football, and it's the toughest, and it's the best, and it's the most amazing. So anything can happen, even though it generally doesn't. But that will then do it for Kevin, for Tom, for myself. Thank you for joining us this hour. Reminder, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell to be notified when we go live like this on Fridays or drop any kind of interviews or podcasts or what have you. We've got plenty of videos. Mark Givler is in Florida this weekend. Dropped a video of 5-star defensive end Damon Wilson just tearing people apart. There's this one point, like 30-second mark. He's chasing a running back down by the sideline, and he just grabs him by his jersey, and he throws him to the ground. And you kind of see the feet go up in the air, and it's pretty remarkable. It's a fun time for all, except, of course, for that running back. So thank you for joining us here. A reminder to please check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where you can have much more of us there at the on the message board there as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.